Today I'm going to review with you guys order of operations and numeric expressions. We're going to be getting ready for a test, but it's also good to just review in general after you've learned something and kind of see the connection between the two. So we started with order of operations. So you have, brother, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So if you have a problem that has more than one thing going on, you have to follow a certain order of how things are done to make sure that those things get done correctly. Because if you don't have a specific order that you use, then you could have 3 or 4 people solving the problem 3 or 4 different ways and getting 3 or 4 different answers. And as we know with math, there should be one right answer. It's pretty reliable that way. All right, so we had started with parentheses and then we added these bracket things. So any kind of brackets you see first, and then you kind of go inside those brackets, you see what they have, you go to parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, or subtraction. So we're going to practice with a couple problems here, and then we're going to go back to a word problem up there. So here's a problem that has no brackets and no parentheses. And this is important because it's easy, like we know, okay, parentheses, do parentheses first, but we have to remember if there's no parentheses, there is still an order that we have to do things, and it is not always from left to right. Okay, so we have to remember what to do when there's not parentheses. So when we're looking here, there's no brackets, there's no parentheses, I see no exponents, I'm moving on. Now I have multiplication or division. So I do go in order, but when I go in order, I have to do the multiplication or division first. Okay, so we are going to start with, and I'm just making sure, okay, yeah, that works. Making sure I did it so that it works, all right? And the other thing when you're dealing with order of operations is that you got to kind of keep it neat, because if you've got this going on here and this going on here, stuff written here, stuff written here, stuff written here, and you're trying to figure it out, it's kind of like division. You might get lost and mix up stuff, not because you don't know how to do it, but because it's a mess, okay? So if we're looking here, we're going to start with multiplication or division, and the first thing I come to is a multiplication problem. I'm going to underline that for you to show that that's the part of the problem I'm doing first. So 6 times 8 is 48, okay? Now, I have to remember, I'm going to put that 48 right underneath here so that I know that I solved that part of the problem. And then I still have all this that I have to do. So I'm going to rewrite the rest of the problem, keeping it all together to remind myself I've only done this one step. I still have this and this that I have not solved for. All right? So now I'm going to look, I have to make sure there's no more multiplication or division, okay? So I look and now I have division. So I have 48 divided by 4, so that's going to be 12. So I've solved that part of the problem, but I still have this part of the problem. Now, the nice thing about this is there's only one thing left for me to do. So if there's only one thing left for me to do, this stuff doesn't matter anymore. I just got to finish the problem. So, but it is the addition that was left, which we had to wait. We couldn't do that yet. So now we have 4 plus 12, which is 16. So my final answer is 16. So what I see some people doing is I see some people doing the 48 divided by 4 underneath here, and then the answer's over here. Like if you have to figure out what 48 divided by 4 is, do it off to the side so that it's not underneath this, so that you can keep this area kind of neat and clear. All right? So let's look again at how parentheses or brackets might change this problem, okay? So if I put parentheses around this, it's not going to change how I do the problem because I still would have had to have done that multiplication first, even though it's good to know. But if I put parentheses around this, now it is definitely going to change how I do the problem, okay? Because now what this means is even though I have to do multiplication or division before addition or subtraction, because there's parentheses, I do that first. Okay, so I'm going to do that first no matter what. All right, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, now I have parentheses, so I have to do this first. So I'm going to put the 10 because that's what that equals. I did this part of the problem first. And then I'm going to, oops, sorry guys, do the rest of the problem, okay? And now that I've solved for everything in the parentheses, those parentheses can disappear, all right? So now, same thing, parentheses are done, I have no exponents, I'm looking for multiplication or division, I have both of those things, so I go in order from left to right. It's really good to just kind of go through your list, all right? So the first thing I come to in 10 times 8, which is 80, I still have to divide that by 4. 80 divided by 4 is 20. And again, if you need to figure out what 80 divided by 4 is, do it off to the side so that you don't, okay, 0, 4 goes into 0 0 times, and there's no remainder. Okay, so that you don't make a mess down here and mix up all your stuff and lose track of what you're doing. All right, now we're going to look at a word problem above here. Order of operations, okay? We actually do that a lot without thinking, especially when we're trying to figure out problems, okay? Solutions to problems, we know sometimes that there's certain things that we have to do first before we do other things. So we can take a problem like this and turn it into a numeric expression, okay? So a numeric expression uses numbers and operations. It's like a set of instructions. It's kind of like your order of operations. So we're going to do things in a certain order. Let's look here. Kevin has 15 chickens that each lay 4 eggs a day. He sells the eggs by the dozen. Okay. So that means that he's going to take whatever eggs he has and put them in containers of a dozen. So I got a background knowledge here. A dozen is 12. So I'm going to put in parentheses here. I'll put 12 to remind myself that a dozen is 12. So before he can put his eggs in containers of a dozen, he needs to figure out how many eggs he has. So he has 15 chickens that each lay 4 eggs. So this is going to be multiplication because, all right, 15 chickens that each lay 4 eggs. We're not splitting up the eggs by 4. We're getting 4 eggs from every chicken. So we're getting 4 eggs 15 times, okay? So we're going to have 15 times 4. Now, and then we have to take whatever that is and split it up into containers of a dozen. All right? So far, so good. Now, let me move that down just a little bit because I'm going to add something to it. 15 times 4 divided by 12. Now, we need to do this first. So for us, it's totally fine to put this in parentheses because it needs to be done first and it's going to help us. But because of order operations, because it's multiplication, it would have been done first anyway. All right, so we got 15 times 4 divided by 12. That is our expression to solve this problem. And why is it division? He sells the eggs by the dozen, so he's going to have to put them in containers of 12. So that's why it's going to be division. I'm going to add something to this problem. I'm going to add he sells each dozen for $3. Okay? So this is where brackets could come in. All right? So let's say brackets kind of means that there's a problem that you want to solve first inside the problem. So let's say if we put brackets around this, whatever this is, we are going to multiply it by $3. So once we figure out all this, if we multiply it by $3, we figure out how many eggs how many dozen eggs he had, then however many dozen that is, we multiply it by $3, and that's how much he's going to make. So now if we were to solve this problem, we would have to do everything inside brackets first. Inside the brackets, there are parentheses, so I'm going to do that first. So I have 15 times 4, which is 60, okay? I'm not done with the brackets yet because inside the brackets, I still have a divided by 12. And outside the brackets, I still have to multiply that by $3 when I'm done. All right, so I have to finish what's in my brackets. 60 divided by 12 is 5. So now brackets are done. $3 times 5, he's going to make $15 off of his eggs from those chickens. Okay? So that's kind of how that works. Sometimes we throw in an extra set of fancy brackets and we haven't really talked about that much yet, but it's not difficult, so I'm just going to show you a problem that has that. Okay? We've got fancy bracket, regular bracket, parentheses, good Lord, times 3, then plus 18 inside of brackets plus 6 times 7 inside of parentheses minus 27 bracket, fancy bracket, divided by 5. Okay, I hope you can see that whole problem. I'm going to turn my camera a little bit this way. So what we're going to do here is you have brackets and brackets and brackets. Brackets and brackets and parentheses. So you start with the farthest brackets on the outside. So we're going to have to do anything inside these fancy brackets first, which means that is going to be totally last. So then we look inside these fancy brackets, and there's other brackets inside. So make sure I did my problem correctly. Oh, I forgot a set of brackets. So what basically happens in here is there's 2 sets of brackets inside the fancy brackets. So what that means is that this is one problem. Oh, that's almost the same color. Sorry, guys. This is one problem inside these brackets that you need to solve. And then there's a separate problem inside these brackets you need to solve. And then when you're done, you can put them together. And once all of that is together, you're going to divide it by 5. So we have 2 kind of problems that we're doing. So fancy brackets and regular brackets inside. So everything inside this has to be done before you divide by 5. And inside those fancy brackets, there's a problem here and a problem here that needs to be done separately and then put back together again. Okay? So 3 times 4 is 12. So in times these brackets, we have 12 plus 18. So that's one problem. Inside these brackets, we have 6 times 7 is 42 minus 27. We have another problem. When we get both of those things, we're going to add it back together. And fancy brackets. Once all that is done, then we may divide it by 5. All right? So 12 plus 18, 8 and 2 is 10, so 30. And over here, 42 minus 27. And again, if you have to do that out, do it off to the side so that it doesn't get in the way of your problem solving. You guys probably aren't going to see a problem this complicated on your test. 12, 3. So 12 minus 7 was 5. So this is going to be 5. So now both of those brackets are done. You have to add them together before you can divide it by 5. Okay, so you have 30 plus 5 is 35. And then out here, now that all that's done, you can finally divide by 5. And 35 divided by 5 is 7. Okay? So when you're dealing with order of operations, just think of it like a giant puzzle.